Hello and welcome to the Plant Paradigm Podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with amazing individuals from all around the world and look for ways to create a clean, green, and sustainable future for us, the planet, and all beings. I'm your host, Tom Simak, an athlete and fellow plant eater who strives to optimize every living ecosystem, passionate about looking after this beautiful floating rock we call home and all the lovely creatures that dwell among it. Today is a different kind of conversation. It is episode 100. Woo! We made it, people. All the way to the 100. It has been a fantastic journey. So I thought that there's a few ways that we can celebrate this. And the first will actually be, a moment of gratitude and maybe looking back at where this podcast started. But also, there's a lot of conversations that we went through to get here. And so many, in fact, that I wouldn't be able to fit them all into this one episode unless I uploaded it and it was like 5 hours long, with just the highlights being over 50 interviews and 50 travel guides. In the past 2 years, we've covered all topics that we're passionate about: fitness, health, nutrition, science, climate change, plastic waste, environmental pollution, fossil fuels, mental health. It's so wide-spanning, which is why I just cannot fit every single interview into this one summary, which I'm incredibly shattered by. But I will choose my not so much favorites, but my highlights in terms of impact. Things that have really made a change in my mentality, the way that I maybe structure my day, the way I look after myself in terms of my health, and things that I've learned on the show that's helped me foster incredible conversations with you guys, my friends and family, around what we can do to better the planet. Of course, we want to better ourselves, but also the animals. So there's 3 main fundamental pillars of veganism, being environment, health, and the ethics. But that's not all we look at here, because I think it doesn't stop there. And I know a lot of you guys listening to this aren't even vegan. And while we do on this show talk about how being plant-based, either predominantly or fully plant-based, is one of the easiest and best ways you can help the environment. But like I said, it certainly does not stop there. We're also looking at food waste, plastic use. So throughout the show, since I started it, I used to consume plastic like no tomorrow. I never used plastic bags or anything like that, but I never really cared or understood the impact. And through these conversations and education, I'm proud to say that, Shana and I, we're 95% plastic free. The only times we'll really consume plastic is when we feel like there's no suitable alternative. A lot of the times we won't opt for burgers like these Beyond Burgers and the V2 and all these different brands because they're surrounded with plastic, and instead opt for a lentil patty or just lentils or chickpeas that we can make ourselves. So the journey has been ever expanding. And my point in all of this is I love that the show can really bring about so many topics, and you can take these keys from the show that maybe you didn't think about taking before, or something that is a bit unique. Plastic free being one of them, zero waste being another, food waste, composting, not using plastic straws, plastic bottles, and of course the big key of eating more plants. These are all things we can do, and the premise of the show and the whole point of why I'm talking to you today and pretty much every week is so that we can minimize our impact on this planet, but also survive as a human species. Something I've learned a lot is that climate change is not about helping the planet. Yes, the planet is dying, but it will be fine. It's about helping ourselves. And with climate change, the earth will come back, but humans as a species might not. And so this episode will be a monologue, and something that I'm going to try to keep really, really interesting. But firstly, for those on YouTube, hi, how you going? Please subscribe, comment, like, share, all the good stuff. Same for you guys listening on all your different podcasting apps. I do see you all, and I really appreciate you lending me your ears through this episode every episode before this and the long list of episodes afterwards. I can tell you that if you've been on this journey with me for a while, there is just some incredible guests to come. People that I've looked up to for years, people that have helped me along my vegan journey, from YouTubers like Mike the Vegan. We've got nutritionists. We've got lots of scientists coming up. We've got fitness experts. We've got head chefs. There is so much coming up. So do not think for a second that the best has come. The best is yet to come. And before we dive into the highlights, I want to talk about two things. Firstly, to celebrate this momentous occasion, I'm doing a giveaway. It is actually going to be the first giveaway from Plant Paradigm. It is going to be over $170 worth of goodness. Things like the Plant-Based Athlete book by former podcast guest Robert Sheik and Matt Fraser as well. We've got literally a whole bag of goodies. And the purpose of this giveaway was, one, to celebrate the 100 episodes, but also to give you guys some eco-friendly products that you might not have tried before. So we've got things like vegan, everything of course is vegan and as plastic free and zero waste as possible. We've got like vegan chili chocolate, we've got hand sanitizer, moisturizer, shaving soaps, metal straws. We've got tissues and paper from Who Gives a Crap, which is a company that we've really loved. And we think that we wanted to give little bits and pieces from a lot of different companies that we've tried to make sure that you guys know that there are alternatives out there that do not support or condone the use of unnecessary waste and don't condone unnecessary consumerism and materialism. So that is the point of this giveaway. So it'll be on the Instagrams. It'll be posted the morning of this episode. It will go for 1 week. So if you're listening to this episode after the 7 days, so from Monday to Sunday, I'm sorry, the time has run out for that competition, but I do plan on doing another one. We're looking at different milestones, such as when we hit 5 or 10,000 followers, but also maybe the 150th or 200th episode. And of course, they're only going to get bigger and better. To enter the giveaway, just head over to our Instagram at plant.paradigm and just tag a friend in the comments and make sure you're following us. That's it. You don't need to follow all the brands that we're shouting out, because we're not sponsored by any of the brands. It's purely brands that we like and that we think are doing a good job. So you just need to follow Plant Paradigm, tag a friend, that's it. Enter as many times as you want. Now, moving on to a bit of a throwback. So for those of you who don't know, this show, I don't know if anyone's actually following on from when this show was originally the How to Travel Vegan podcast. So I felt like there was a gap in the market about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. And I kind of thought, how can we address this? Because when we traveled, we would always use Happy Cow. And I know for a lot of vegans, it's quite stressful to travel and not knowing what healthy food alternatives there are, especially in places like Europe or Southeast Asia or Africa, where you don't speak the language, or maybe English isn't as accessible. So you want to have at least some sort of prior knowledge or research done so you know that you can get food in your mouth. And really the guide was created to host that accessibility. So there were 3 to 5 minute episodes, and generally we actually tried the places ourselves that we were reviewing. A few I didn't, but to give you a context of the research I went through for each episode, with a place like maybe Budapest or Vienna, you know, there's maybe 200 to 300 restaurants that offer vegan options. And I really tried to sum it up between 3 to 10 places that you got to try out. And that meant a lot of reading reviews, a lot of looking at their stories, sometimes contacting them to ask questions about how much plastic they use. So there was a lot of research that went into the show, and a lot of the episodes did quite well. And I think we helped a lot of people ease that anxiety of maybe traveling and not knowing where to eat. And really, internally, it gave me a lot of confidence that, holy crap, no matter where in the world you look, there's options. Like I know in Seattle, and I can't remember the place to save my life, but there's an option, a vegan restaurant in the airport. So there's a lot of places that will really shock you that are vegan friendly. Places like Egypt have a lot of vegan friendly foods. Places like America and Australia, you don't have to really worry. Places like Germany, UK, also places that you don't have to stress out. If the only problem you'll find there is this concept of having too many options. And that's a really funny problem to have. And that's really where the show was at for about a year and a half. And I really enjoyed the show because for me, I just wanted to give people the 3 minutes lowdown while they may be going for a quick walk or at the airport before they visit a city so that they know where to eat. And so they don't have to waste their time. And so they don't have to eat a animal product because they think there's lack of options when really that was never the case. So eventually, as the show progressed, unfortunately, we were hit by good old COVID-19. And I had a decision to make at that point, continue going on to this traveling vegan concept, knowing that people might not be traveling for a long time. And my worry was also that a lot of the reviews that I had done, unfortunately, a lot of these restaurants weren't big chains. They were small family-owned businesses. And that means that if something unexpected were to happen and they were unprepared, which a lot were, it means that the review is almost rendered pointless because they have shut down. And now that was the real issue. And since then, a few months ago, I went through all the episodes and noted down which had closed down. And in some reviews in some cities, it was more than half of the places I mentioned. So I thought at that point when COVID first hit, I should maybe switch to interviews. And I had some people reach out to me at the time to be featured on the podcast, even though I didn't do interviews at all. And I thought, you know what, I've got these people reaching out. They're talking about traveling eco-friendly, which is something that I'm extremely passionate about. And so I thought, this will be a fun conversation. And one of the first few interviews I had was talking about, it was with Bridie Reed and talking about how to travel eco-friendly, different products to purchase, what to watch out for, how to tackle language barriers. So different things that was really in the travel concept to still make sure that we can travel without harming the environment, which is a really big thing. And the biggest takeaway from that point was slow travel and traveling like you actually care about the place you're visiting is crucial. It's vital for the sustainable concept of this country and city being unique and being culturally significant and being itself for a long time for more and more travelers to see. But I hope that through this transition, eventually as I started talking to more people, I'm like, man, I want to talk about climate change. I want to talk about plastic waste. I want to learn these things because I had no idea. And I thought about for a moment of deleting all the How to Travel Vegan episodes and just starting fresh. But I thought, no, you know what? This is something that has evolved from How to Travel Vegan. And I think without it, this wouldn't be the show that it is today. And I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And so I thought, let's keep it there because some of the episodes were actually doing really well. And I was getting some really good feedback on people that had tried the places on YouTube, as well as from podcasts and people reaching out on Instagram. So I'm like, these episodes have got to stay. And so if you dive back into the archives, one of my first interviews was with eco warrior Callie Ackland, and you can really watch the development of my brain and my knowledge, which is hilarious. And looking back retrospectively, I'm really proud to admit in interviews when I have no idea what something is. This show isn't about me acting like the smartest person in the world. Absolutely not. I'll gladly admit when I don't know something. And just last year, or just over a year and a half ago, I had no idea what greenwashing was. Now we've used that term hundreds of times on the show, and there's absolutely no shame in not knowing what greenwashing is because I had no idea until Callie mentioned it, and I was like, stop. What are you talking about? I'll insert the clip now so you guys can see what I mean.
Frustrating.
Did you say greenwashing? Brainwashing? Greenwashing? What'd you say?
Greenwashing. Oh, okay.
Greenwashing. What's that?
Greenwashing is something that pretty much all of us encounter almost every day and we don't realize it. What greenwashing is when companies make themselves seem super eco-friendly, because eco-friendly sells. Customers
True.
care. They want things that they know have a minimal impact on the planet. And, we see that with the way that we see so many companies that'll slap a all natural label on it, even though it isn't regulated here in the US. Anybody can put that label on. It doesn't even have to be true.
Really?
You
Shit.
know, yeah. Oh, well, the US regulations are a whole nother mess of a topic. But we also, you'll see bottled water that says gluten free. It's like, it's
What?
water. Of course it's gluten free. Companies are putting these labels on because they know that it helps sell their products. And so when they're doing that with regards to eco-friendly or sustainability in particular, it's called greenwashing. And you see that in examples like you'll see reusable straws or a bamboo toothbrush sold in plastic packaging, or
Oh,
you'll
that
see,
frustrates the hell out of me because we have it
yep,
in Australia, bamboo. It's in a cardboard box. Cardboard box. And you're like, this is phenomenal. And then you open it and the toothbrush is in plastic. And you're like, what the hell?
yeah,
And on the
yeah.
other side, you have like amazing food packaging in the vegan aisle in Coles. And you open these frozen burgers and there's no plastic. And it's just phenomenal. And it's so hard to tell sometimes. Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
I know. Cardboard boxes with plastic bags inside are just the bane of my existence.
So that is essentially what greenwashing is. And it's something that is pretty much everywhere we look in marketing. It's something that is unfortunately rampant. And there is very little regulation in some countries and cities. And that's why it's something that we talk about quite a bit, because we can get sucked into that kind of stuff because we want to have hope. And it's fine to have hope, but it's also incredibly vital to be skeptical and to look into things further than what the label says. I think it's time to dive into the rest of the highlights. But before we do, there is one big thank you I have to give, and that's to you guys. Every person listening and watching this show has made an incredible impact to the algorithm and to myself. So every single download I know that I get or is really an opportunity for someone else to learn something, and that person to then take that lesson into the conversations and into their life to hopefully make an impact that is bigger than them, bigger than us, bigger than any individual person can be. It's about doing something as a group. It's that whole concept of 2 minds is better than one and 100 is better than 10. You got to just band together to make some really big change. It's that big, I guess, reason one person can't make a difference. And that's especially touted out in vegans. Like, one vegan can't make a difference. And that's right. One vegan might not, but one vegan could inspire another and could inspire another. And then we've got a snowball effect. So that's what these episodes really try to do. So I thank you guys with full gratitude for listening to these episodes. And that's why I come every single day and every single interview. I'm trying to give the best possible content. So on to these highlights. I thought it would be wise to break these highlights down into a few categories because, like I said at the beginning, there's so many categories that we cover. And each topic can become its own tree and its own route to many new ideas and philosophies. So the first one I'll tackle is sustainability and climate change, a big mammoth of a topic. And one of the first episodes I really talked about sustainability and climate change is with my good friend and fellow podcaster, Carlos Cirillo, where my spark really ignited to get cafes and businesses responsible for what they put out into the world. They have a responsibility, and we have a responsibility to vote with our dollar.
I think there's, for example, I worked in packaging for 2 years back home, and I was selling food service packaging. So coffee cups, everything that comes with that, containers, all of that. We had a range that was your stock standard, no bio-friendly stuff. Another range, a level up, that was all your bio-friendly, all of that, which was at a decent price, compostable, all of that.
Yeah.
Then there was the premium, which was like your bio grow bio cup, the stuff you see everywhere with the green label around which was your premium price. But they did everything Mickey Mouse. It was unreal. Their branding, their processes, their everything, because it was all, you could literally compost the lid of a coffee cup. But
Really?
your price,
Okay.
and we did custom printing and all that sort of stuff. Your price for this cup here, that was the cheap option that wasn't all of that. Let's say it was 8 cents a cup, right? You're selling a coffee for what, $4 now.
Yeah.
Nothing. This cup was 12. 4 cents different. Now, when you look at that, you're like, hell yeah, I'd pay 12 cents. I'd probably pay 20 cents if it was that.
Yeah.
But as a business that's selling tens of thousands of coffees a month or a year, that adds up to a couple of grand. Now, to you and me, it's like, but the environment, like that's the whole thing. And I think when I was selling them, I wouldn't even give them that option. But they would look at this option and look at their other suppliers and go, they're cheaper. And I'm like, yeah, but they're not compostable. Like, don't you get that you'll get more customers because people want to make...
Yeah, people want to support that. They want to be a part of the bigger cause. And that's, you want to make that as easy and as accessible as humanly possible.
100%. And it's not I think you can be used to manipulate people in marketing and all that. But if there is a choice, this is a bad example. It's 100% recycled, this water bottle. But like a coffee cup, going to a coffee place that was your big chains that don't use biodegradable stuff versus a small chain that I'm paying, let's say that's $3.50 for a coffee, or this one's $5, but they use all biogrow, it's compostable, they probably have bins there as well. I would make that choice because of my values. Now with that, I understand from a business point of view that it's money at the end of the day, but I think that they're starting to wake up to, yeah, cool, more people will support you if you go the other option.
Yeah.
And not just vegans and plant-based people. It's the environment, it's the world, people that want to vote with their dollars.
Speaking of cafes, my good friend and vegan endurance athlete, Jansen Andre, ran a vegan cafe in Melbourne a few years ago called The Vegan Shack. Unfortunately, C19 took another victim and they had to close up shop, and now he's up here being a personal chef. And they really ran the place in an inspiring way with sustainability in mind. So I really wanted to insert his thoughts on the whole topic of cafes and sustainability. And then in terms of like running Vegan Shack, do you find that it's quite hard to be like sustainable or like minimizing your waste? Like what challenges do you guys have with that kind of stuff?
We like every food business, there's always food wastage, but I try and minimize that by using like things like with the tuna that we make, we keep the pulp from the fresh almond milk that we make. I try and use things where I can to avoid extra costs, but also to, add in that element of sustainability as well. But yeah, it is hard as a food business, because you're always forecasting what's going to walk in the door. And sometimes it doesn't always happen. That Wednesday is as busy as the last Wednesday. So there's always going to be wastage, but I'll try to minimize that by like either before it's going bad, offer like a special on it, or either consume it ourselves, knowing that we're not going to like get through that by the end of the day. And in terms of like packaging and stuff, we always try and go with very sustainable sources, like whether it's sugarcane or biodegradable, plant material.
Is it easy to find manufacturers that offer like biodegradable things?
Yeah, it's out there at the moment, and I wouldn't say it's hard to find. You just have to look for it. But most big companies that offer those services and products will have a line of like whether it's sustainable or vegan, or they'll have something now. And it's just, you just have to marry up what the cost is. And some of the times it's actually cheaper than,
oh, really? How is it cheaper? Because I've always heard it's always like 3 cents more per this, 4 cents more per that.
I guess it really depends on the monopoly that the company has, who you're getting it from. Or
I like that how you use the word monopoly. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
true.
Don't pass, collect 200.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it really depends who it is that you're buying from. We try and all of our suppliers, we try and keep really small, because at the end of the day, everyone's on this planet to survive, and I'd rather give my money to small businesses rather than big corporations, because I know it helps them out. And they're doing it for the right reasons, rather than, like I just said before, that addition of that vegan line or that sustainable line to their already unsustainable line of products. While it's great, you're still supporting them financially to keep on creating those other products that people buy. So it comes down to ethics, who we choose as suppliers as well. And we choose vegan, like people who run businesses where possible and affordable. It's like we use organic where possible and where affordable.
But as you know, sustainability is obviously more than cafes. It's all encompassing. It's a movement that we have to adopt. Like we first learned from my friend Jimmy Half Cup. You remember Jimmy, the guy with half a beard that inspired me to have half a beard for about 4 months. And we raised, I believe, $300 with Plant Paradigm to help save the Daintree rainforest. Jimmy is an incredible inspirational figure, and he was my first exposure to what clean green gas is, and if that even is clean gas or if it's just greenwashing.
In saying that clean green gas is our future, it is absolute BS. It is a lie. It is dangerous. There's no such thing as clean green gas, which is...
What is green gas for those who...
So that's the term they use, green, clean gas. There's no such thing as gas as being clean. It's actually just, if anything, it's 120 times more potent than coal, and sure, it only doesn't stay in the atmosphere for as long.
So it's just greenwashing, really. It's
huge greenwashing, and what it is it's coal seam gas or fracking. So you've got two sides of it: fracking or unconventional fracking. So fracking is where they use huge amounts of chemicals and water, and they fracture the coal seams underneath the ground, and then that releases the gas, and they never capture all that gas. So it's huge flares that are 3 meters in the air. It's, every second it's pumping and operating. It's 88 kilos of salt waste. It's just, it's fracked up. It's fucking crazy. And then the other side is it's conventional gas extraction, where it's the same process, but they just claim they don't use the chemicals. But bearing in mind,
so we're better than these guys, which makes us right. Okay, I know what you're saying.
But the thing is, it's just lunacy, because it's actually then punching down in some instances through our aquifers. I mean, our aquifers, the Great Artesian Basin, the world's largest basin on the planet, and we want to stuff around with this. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of years old. And we're thinking, oh, yeah, we'll just ram a pipe through that and we'll make sure that won't contaminate it or won't cause any issues. I mean, the reports that have been shown in the US from this devastating industry have been, proven time and time and time again. I mean, they're our last reserve banks. Once our aquifers are gone and dried up or polluted, really, we're the second driest continent on the planet, apart from Antarctica. What the flip are we doing, where we could be solar panel, wind turbine, hydro, you name it. But here we are again. Everyone's just bowing down or towing the line with the big invested coal and gas industries. So yeah, we got to change that narrative and bloody quick, because as you said, 7 years.
Going forward with that point, fossil fuels isn't the only villain here. Unfortunately, renewable energy isn't perfect, and that's something that really shifted my paradigm. It's something that shook me to my core. I learned that firsthand from this conversation with Bernice Cunningham, a climate change policy advisor in the United Nations framework on climate change.
There's a lot of greenwashing in the climate change industry.
Yes.
When you talk about renewable energy, I don't like that term renewable energy, because in the concept of renewable energy in Nicaragua, for example, you call the energy that is produced with the bagage of the sugarcane renewable energy.
Biofuel.
But to produce, biofuel. But to produce that biofuel, you land grab, you make the communities more poor, you use water, you use a lot of chemics. So that's not renewable. You are destroying the land, you are deforestation, you're making the communities poor, and then you get in the bagage of that sugarcane to make biofuel, and you call it renewable. So I think there's a lot of greenwash in that term, renewable energy. I will say we'll have to go to a term of clean energy. big hydroelectric are another example of human rights violations in Central America. And most of these funds comes from the United Nations. So they're using funds of the United Nations and projects that has a lot of implications in human rights, indigenous people. So we have to be very careful that the medicine is not worse than the disease.
So that's something that I've really taken forward, and it's made me really skeptical of renewables. And don't get me wrong, I support renewables 100%, but more than renewables, I think shifting the idea to clean energy and friendly to both the environment and the people of the land, is incredibly vital as well. It's not one or the other, and I think both can be achieved in a synonymous relationship. When you walk down at the beach and you see some rubbish, do you pick it up? Do you think it makes a difference? That's a question that I had, and fortunately for me, this conversation with Martin Skadal answered that perfectly in the most eccentric and eloquent way.
One beautiful thing that I like to mention about like the pointless thing is that like for the whole world, for us to go and clean that little island is like nothing. But for the ecosystem on that island, it means the whole world.
Oh,
Like,
wow. Okay.
it's like so beautiful. Yeah. So that's really good motivation.
So Martin is a ocean advocate. He's an ocean activist. He loves picking up rubbish. He loves making a difference. And obviously when we're looking at rubbish, garbage, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, this whole system of rubbish that has entered the oceans, entered our landfill, it comes from somewhere. And in the case of the ocean, if you guys watch Seaspiracy, seafood is a humongous culprit. And understanding that what you consume at a fundamental level comes from somewhere. It is farmed somewhere. It has taken resources, and are contrary to a lot of beliefs around the earth, our resources are actually finite, and we have to be very efficient and resourceful to make sure that we can maintain ourselves as a race for years, many years to come. And someone who explained that really well is the host of the cooking show, Trying Vegan with Mario. My interview with Mario Fabri addressed that question and topic head on.
That's one of the things I started to learn about more is like, how is food actually grown? Like, where is this food actually coming from? And I'll drive through Nebraska and I'll see these massive cornfields and massive soy fields. And I started like asking questions about how that stuff works. And then I'm learning that a lot of it is so first of all, a lot of the plant-based food, a lot of the soy and corn grown in the United States is actually grown for cattle, which is an interesting thing. It takes up so much land and so many resources, and they just pummel it with these pesticides that we don't really know the true result of what could happen if we're spraying so many pesticides on this incredible soil that has so much micronutrients, but now we're destroying and killing it. And we're learning that we can't repurpose the soil after we destroy it. So you start to learn these things, and it starts to trigger a lot of emotions around food, because this is also what everybody is eating. So that was like a huge trigger for me. So it sent me again on one of these like explorative journeys. And I started to learn about local, and I started to learn about local produce, and I started to learn about like food forests, where you could actually grow these micro communities of foods that actually complement each other and are good for the soil, and it's completely organic, and the pests kind of take care of themselves, because it's like this natural life cycle that would occur if humans weren't on their own, but it's so fruitful if we don't put as much control into it. So I started learning about these things, and I visited this company in Arizona that was actually working with a bean called the tepary bean that grows in the desert with practically no water, similar to, I got to look more into quinoa and how quinoa's gone. That's super interesting to me. This bean, again, grows in the desert. It is so resilient, and there's a lot of good reasons for that, because water is one of the most used up resources by farmers. So if we could use less water, we can grow more crops more efficiently. That's a huge plus. And also as temperatures rise and these summers are getting more brutal, like I live in California, I've been here for a couple of years, like we could feel it's getting warmer. People could debate the cause, but we can't debate the fact that it's actually happening. So we need things that could be resilient. We need the tepary bean that could actually grow in a desert. So if temperatures rise, we can grow it in more places, and we're actually prepared for those moments. So that's something that I learned, and that's something that I care so much about. So now when I buy food, I'm like thinking, like, what is the life cycle of this food? Like, where did this actually come from? And you learn so much by being curious and asking questions. And you learn so much about like really thinking about your food. But also the United States does such a good job of covering up. So it's unfortunate that you kind of got to do a lot of your own research. Like, it's hard if you go to a grocery store to know like what was grown by somebody who has your right health in mind versus somebody who is willing to use experimental chemicals in a situation where they might make a profit for a long-term benefit because they have to meet a valuation for their board of investors because they have a quarterly review coming up, and it snowballs into this lobby where food is controlled by people with money. It's hard to find out who the right and authentic people are to purchase from, but it's definitely something I think is super important.
Just a note around Mario as well. He's gone on to have a TEDx talk on this exact topic, which is almost up to 100,000 views on YouTube. It's one video with thousands of impact points. Anyone can make a difference. I'm going to shift to the next topic, which is something admittedly we don't talk about a lot, and maybe not enough, because mindfulness, which is this topic, is a really big world. I know there's a lot of podcasts, books, magazines, videos, apps around mindfulness. And why I think it's really important for people in the climate space, vegans in particular, is because we know it can be frustrating. Like, I was at the market today and we're watching people just pick up fruit and put them in plastic bags and vegetables in plastic, like, unnecessarily. And you think in that moment, why? Just why? You're out here trying to do the best you can when others are completely disseminating your work and your effort. And it really isn't about that. And you have to have the audacity and the know-how to get yourself out of that mindset. And it's not easy, and it might not ever be easy, but being mindful and having a practice and knowing that you doing the best you can is going to be the best thing for the planet. And you need to stay mindful to have these stable conversations with other people, because if you're tackling ignorance on so many levels, especially I'm sure vegans can relate, you know, when someone says, where do you get your protein? These things can really ignite a flame. It's like, why are we still talking about this? Let's move on. The climate this is an emergency. And so that's why I think mindfulness is vital. And that's why I always ask people, or usually ask people when we start chatting about this topic, you know, what do you do? How do you stay mindful? Because what works for me isn't going to work for my partner, Shana, and it's not going to work for some of my friends. It's not going to work for my family. Everyone has different and unique needs that will match their maybe scale of anxiety. It might match their energy. It might match their habits and preference better. And we cannot be effective activists without being mindful and having inner contentment and joy. And I've only talked about this on the show, like I said, a few times, but one of the first was with animal activist Dim Kailaris. Well, how does someone even start with meditation? Because meditation's hard. Let's be honest.
Yeah, dude, it's like anything that you start in life. Like getting the ball rolling is like painful. It's really tough. But I recommend there's an app that you can get called Insight Timer. I use Insight Timer every day. And so what it is an app that you can use. It's completely free, and there's thousands of guided meditations on there. So they have keywords on there as well. So if you're stressed, you click stress. If you need help sleeping, you click sleep. If you're if you're depressed, there's one for everything, whatever you need on there. So, and they have meditations that go from 0 to 5 minutes, and then 5 to 10 minutes, and they go longer. So my best recommendation I can give people is to get that app, Insight Timer, or there's another app called Headspace, and start small. 5 minutes. Everyone has 5 minutes spare time. Everyone says, I got no time for meditation. Set your alarm 5 minutes early and get that shit done. Just every day. Just be consistent with it.
Oh, for sure.
And the
it
key
should
to
be a
success with meditation.
Should be a wake-up call. If you don't have 5 minutes in your day, you need to reassess, man. Like if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't have 5 minutes in your 24-hour block that you have every day, every week, every year of your life, you need to. But what kind of, I guess people just don't value it. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Everyone knows if you ask someone to list what they think they should be doing, but they don't do, it's like cold showers, exercise more, meditate,
Yeah.
eat healthy, plant-based, eat more fruits, eat more vegetables, stop eating junk, but people don't value it. So what are some things that you have found very valuable to what meditation has taught you?
Yeah, like meditation's taught me honesty. It's taught me patience. It's focused my mind on like getting shit done, to be completely honest. Like before I'd make up all these excuses, and that noise in your head, that noise that says you're not good enough, don't do it tomorrow, blah blah blah. Don't have that cold shower, don't turn that fucking hot water off because you're gonna freeze, it's gonna be painful. With the meditation, you can quiet that shit down. That's like you can get rid of that and you can focus. Okay, this is where I know I need to do this. Yes, it's going to be painful, but you can. It just makes you stronger. It makes you be like you can do stuff that you thought you couldn't do before. But the meditation, it's like a workout, but for your mind. Like everyone goes to the gym and they work out and they want to become really strong, but when you meditate, it's like a workout, man, and like you can really push the limits, whether it's running or whether it's doing a sport or whether it's drawing. It makes you more creative. It's like an upgrade to the system. Instead of being lazy all the time, it improves your life in every way. And that's why I recommend it to everyone. Yeah, the veganism thing like got me, it gets you on a level, but the meditation just helps you make better decisions in your life, and it will improve your life 100%. I haven't met someone that meditates consistently and it hasn't changed their life. So
Of course, being vegan and being outspoken might put you in a bit of a crossfire between people because at this stage, we're really the minority, although I'm hoping that will slowly change. But of course, there is one other looming thing which I know a lot of people follow, and I know a lot of people might work in workplaces that have a bullying culture. Maybe within their family structure, they have a bit of a bullying system. These things are unacceptable, and it's something I've only addressed once, or not me. Actually, it was Sienna Earp that addressed this exact topic. She's no stranger to being bullied, and I think her words on the topic were very enlightening. What advice would you have for someone that is still currently going through it and needing some help?
Understand that other people's actions and words of you and towards you aren't a reflection of you at all. It's always a reflection of them. And I know that that's like been said a million times before, but it's really hard to feel that and to fully actually understand that and integrate that, especially when you're going through it. And I know that, and it's easy now for me to say it. But if you can just come back to that reminder and like that remembrance of it's not actually to do with me at all, and this person is missing something, lacking something, and they probably just need a little bit more love in their life. So radical kindness, I think, might be a really good answer, or at least it would be worth a shot. So giving like insane kindness and compassion to the people who you probably feel least deserve it, to the people who are hurting you, probably even on a daily basis. Or radical honesty, being upfront and saying, hey, if they're mature enough to hear it, like if it's a workplace situation, obviously in high school, maybe they're not ready for it, but to be like, hey, this is how your words are affecting me and it hurts. I just wanted to let you know that it's affecting my work life with you, my relationship with you, whatever it is. And seeing if you can come to like a really easy but problem-free solution. I'm not really one for conflict, to be honest.
I wouldn't have imagined that.
No, but I think that's what that would be what a lot of people who do get bullied say, is because they don't have the guts or they don't think it's important enough to stand up for themselves. So in the right situation, I would probably still get bullied, to be honest. Like, I think if I wasn't self-aware enough and I didn't know exactly what I stood for and who I was, and within that room as well to grow and expand, I think I would still take people's comments to heart more than I should. So yeah, learning about yourself and what you stand for is really important, because then other people's words can't do anything unless you believe it. I always thought that. And that's kind of one thing that I would always remind myself in depression, was that it's like someone else can say whatever they want, but it's the things that you say about yourself and that you believe about yourself that hurt the most.
Now I think let's move on to the next topic: health, nutrition, and fitness. It is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and rightfully so. You can get from the questions I ask on the show, and one of them is, what is healthy to you? And the reason I ask this question to everyone is because I think growing up, we have this mentality or this concept that being healthy is eating a certain amount of protein, is eating a certain amount of carbs, is exercising a few days a week. And yes, these things are vital, but I think it extends beyond that. And I think we ignore other pillars of our health. And one that I've talked about a lot, and a lot of people are giving it attention now, more so than in the past, I believe, is sleep. This is an aspect of health that is vital. It is not a pillar of health. It is a foundation of which it lays on. Another reason, and to give you an example of how skewed my concept of health was, when I was younger, and when I say younger, I mean like maybe 17, 18, 19, my concept of health, or what a healthy person looked like, was someone who, ate pretty well, was shredded. So it was all physical for me. So it was quite shredded, looked good. I didn't think about how you felt. That's not something that was in my mind. And my pinnacle of health was someone who could run a marathon. So I'm like, if you can run a marathon, you're healthy. Now, looking back retrospectively, having seen plenty of people run marathons and running a marathon myself, I can confidently conclude that that is not what healthy means. And before we get into different things, I wanted to really give you an idea of what I think healthy is. I think health is having no pain. So I think if you have knee pain, shoulder pain, I think there's things to work on. And that's your body really telling you something. And in the past, and still currently to a certain extent, I pushed through a lot of pain that maybe I shouldn't push through. And that to me isn't healthy. So sometimes I'll run and I'll pull my hammy and I'll push on, because I can't at this stage yet identify the difference between a pulled muscle and soreness just from really just running for a long time, or whatever the exercise may be. With working out, I feel like it's a bit easier. You feel that muscle soreness, you understand that muscle soreness, but the moment the pain is sharp, you're like, oh, I've got to stop. And so I think living pain-free is incredibly important for health. I think another concept is spending time with friends and family. And when I say spending time, I mean without your phone. So yes, sometimes I'll chill on the couch on my phone and Sean will be there and some friends. But when it's a get together and it's a mutual, hey, let's set this time aside to spend time together, there's no devices. It's something that I think is cards. I think that's very important. It's not TV. Like, yes, there's a moment in time in which you can sit and watch a documentary or a series, and that's okay. But you probably can't get away with saying you're spending this time with this person efficiently. And I think setting aside time to really be with your friends and family, being present, is incredibly important. And if you're not used to being present in that way, or that's quite confronting to you, what I would suggest is to do it alone and spend some time alone with yourself. Maybe go for a walk outside without music, without your phone, and just go for a walk. Go for a wander. Could be 10 minutes, could be 30, and just look around. Smile every now and again. If you catch eye contact and they don't look too threatening, maybe smile back if they're smiling. Things like this, I think, define health. And of course, I'm not going to deny the impact that health in terms of nutrition and exercise fit in. I think exercising 30 minutes a day, or at least 30 minutes of moderate to high level activity, maybe 4 to 5 times a week, I think that's quite healthy. It doesn't mean doing what I do and work out maybe twice a day, do a 2-hour bike ride, doing 1,000 squats. These things are not important. What is important is spending that time with your body and really trying to work that out. And when it comes to nutrition, I'm of course going to say eating plant-based is the most ideal for your body, in my opinion. Of course, with the science, we don't know this. We know it's probably most ideal to at least eat 80% plants. That is the minimum I would suggest. Of course, not being a nutritionist or a doctor. This is purely what the science is saying. But you'll be a completely healthy individual eating at least 80%. And I generally do like to eat fruits and vegetables and beans and nuts, legumes. For me, I'll eat about 50 grams of fiber a day. I will eat about 40 different plants a week. And I fast every now and again. Of course, not a lot. I do like to eat food, but I know that there's a time and place to not eat. And that also means there's a time and a place to not rely on stimulants. That means not having 3 coffees a day. That means not having a coffee after 11 a.m., especially if that could affect your sleep. And of course, when it comes to sleep, to bring this long-winded point home, I think 8 hours, or 7 to 8, should I say, would be the absolute minimum. And if you're not hitting that, I would be extremely wary on that impact on your body that's making. That means you might have less muscle recovery if you're working out, and that means you work out less, and it's a snowball effect. That means that you're not regulating your ghrelin properly, which means you're probably going to reach for the sugary and fatty foods before you reach for the fruits and the veg and the whole foods. That also means that you might be cranky and not as happy and not willing to spend time with friends and family. All these things make an impact, and sleep is something that is incredibly important. If I haven't said it enough times, what I do is when I go to bed, I generally don't touch my phone for about an hour prior. I might read a book, but generally I might do some stretching, but nothing too much. I just don't touch a device an hour prior to bed. And that could be Shana and I playing some cards before bed, chatting, whatever it is, but I don't touch my device. And yes, the white light maybe makes an impact, but it's the stimulation that your phone gives you that makes the impact. If you find that you can't go to sleep, I've even tried meditating before bed, and I think that's a perfect way to go to sleep. And if you still can't go to sleep, I would also try to reduce your coffee intake or eliminate coffee for about 3 days and see how that affects your sleep cycle. If you can't get to sleep, that means maybe you're having a coffee too late in the day. Try to make it earlier. Try to skip a few days. Try to really be tired. Try to really get to, if you're tired at 5 o'clock, try to just push through naturally. And when you get to bed, just flop and drop. But that is my long-winded, I guess, explanation of what I think health is at the most basic and core level. And now onto nutrition and the interview highlights. Nutrition in science, I feel like it's very grey and it's very hard to chop through the BS and the conflict of interest, and there is no infinite. There's always unknowns in science, and that is the most frustrating and liberating thing. The first conversation I had around protein on the show was actually with influencer Alex Glover around protein and how much we really glorify it. And if you think about it, protein is vital, but holy crap, do we glorify it. Let's see what Alex had to say.
Protein is the myth. I'll get back onto that because amino acids are what are the building compounds within protein, right? So why would we be trying to chuck protein into our body? Why wouldn't we want to be chucking the building blocks of protein to enable our protein to actually build itself, which is our muscles, right? So why after a gym workout are we told to smash a protein shake, not half a watermelon, which contains the most abundant amount of amino acids like leucine, lysine, which are prevalent in muscle building after the gym? We're not told that. Also, not only that, it is so readily accepted in our body because it is a high fructose fruit, which is so readily absorbed into our gut. Okay, so.
And then I met Lucy Bartholomew, a pro vegan endurance runner who set multiple course records on a plant-based diet and has completed 350-kilometer long races. And our conversation was one of the most popular conversations on this show. So I thought I'd share her daily routine for success.
Yeah, so I mean, my days don't vary too much. In the life I lead, weekends mean nothing. Weekdays, every day is a weekday, it seems, or every day is a weekend, probably more so. I wake up with the light. So, like if it's summer, I wake up really, really early. If it's winter, I wake up a bit later. So I don't have blinds and I have a skylight. So everything kind of just when the light enters is when my body wakes up. And then I'm pretty relaxed in the mornings. I have some green tea. I have a lot of water and then go running. So I usually train fasted, which is something that is it's a bit divided on people's opinions on it, especially for females. But it's
Why
something
for females in particular?
Fasting, I would just say that I am too lazy to get up early enough to eat, and I just don't feel great eating before a run. So for females, what it can do to your hormones is something that is like a huge part in training fasted. I know that it's pretty beneficial for men, but for women, it's considered to be not as advantageous, especially when not done well. Because I think the whole thing is that women tend not to then catch up on the calories after the run. Which I have no problem in doing.
Smoothie bowl to the rescue. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I train for, 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, maybe. Maybe that means strength after it, or it might just be running. I have a smoothie bowl. I play with my dog, sit in the sun, hang out, talk to my dad, do some emails, like really just put my feet up and rest and take the mind off the training. Have some lunch. It's normally like a lighter lunch, and then go to the second training, which might be like swimming or cycling or running again or gym, or maybe just stretching and yoga. And then, put the feet up again, have some dinner and go to bed and do it all again.
Have you ever wondered what it takes to be an ultra runner? Well, I do all the time. And I asked world record holder Nick Butter what it takes to be an ultra runner. In case you're wondering what record he holds, he's the first human to run a marathon in every single country in the world, and he did that in 2 years, which I believe amounts to 3 to 4 marathons a week for just under 2 years. Like, that is insanity. And before I give this clip some airtime, Nick actually also just circumnavigated the whole of UK in a record-breaking time in 100, I believe it was just over 130 days. And the previous record was 200 days. And a lot of these days he was running 2 marathons a day. So this is someone whose opinion I would really respect in terms of what it takes to become an ultra-endurance athlete.
Stubbornness, I suppose. Stubbornness, a little bit of selfishness, actually, because you do have to sacrifice quite a lot to do that, because it's, you're away from your family and your friends. And I mean, running the world was a classic example. Great friends of mine that I've had all my life growing up with at school, you instantly disappear and you're in foreign countries all the time and you lose touch. And so being able to make sure that you're balancing that, you kind of have to be a little bit aware that you're being selfish in one way or another. Stubbornness is genuinely a good answer, I think, for how to be an ultra runner. You also then have to learn to endure the pain and the aches and pains. And the biggest thing of all, I think, is to understand that the mind controls the body, not the other way around. Because a lot of people say to me, I can't go for a run today, I've hurt my knee. So no, you're letting your brain tell yourself that your knee is really hurting. And of course, broken bones and things like that, you can't escape. But you can learn to push through more pain than you appreciate than usual. And I mean, I think many people on lots of podcasts for decades before me have said the same thing. It's just understanding what your brain does and learning and educating yourself about, how much sleep you need or the right foods you need. And as my dad would always say to me as a kid, if you want to do something, then try it once. And if you want to get better at it, then practice it. That's it. Right? That's the only reason you go from a runner to an ultra runner, just do it more and run further. So I think the other thing actually with ultra running is that it isn't actually the same sport, in my opinion, as running. because it's a completely different kettle of fish. You're not running to like super speeds. You're just trotting along in your own mind, kind of chilling out. And then you also run for longer through darkness, so it's just a magical world. Yeah, I love it.
You can rarely talk about health and fitness without talking about fasting. I never really knew that water fasts were good. I'd kind of heard of juice fasts. My conversation with Dr. Michael Clapper has really turned on a bunch of light bulbs in my mind around the benefits of fasting, both intermittent and water fasting, how possible they are and how beneficial they are. I'm usually doing intermittent fasting in days that I maybe have an early dinner and then I start the day with a late meal around 11 or 12. And I did go 40 hours with just water, which was incredibly difficult. And it's still on my list to do a 5-day water fast. But here is Dr. Clapper's thoughts on fasting.
Well, if you don't mind me taking a long run up here through couple million years here, a million years ago on the African savanna, our ancient foraging ancestors spent all day foraging. The main calories they got was not from mammoth meat. It was from roots and tubers that were dug up mostly by the women. But that's what our small mouths and grinding teeth are about. We're starch eaters. Well, you can imagine our traveling band of foragers there, just by the lay of the land and weather vagaries, that there might be 4 or 5 days go by when you don't find anything to eat, and you drank water if you were lucky. But these enforced water fasts for 4, 5, 6 days were probably the rule back then. And these intermittent fasting periods were just the way it was. And when the body is forced to do without calories, then it has to burn its own fat stores that it has already accumulated. And when it enters that state of metabolizing your own fat as opposed to taking in carbohydrates from the outside, remarkable things happen in the body. These molecules called ketones come in to the bloodstream, and they're the breakdown products of the fat that you're burning. And when there's ketones in the blood, they signal all the tissues in the body to enter a different state altogether. It's a state of conservation. The body doesn't want to waste energy, so it turns down inflammation in the body. Inflammatory reactions are wasteful of heat and energy, so inflammation turns down. Cancer growth also is dialed back. That's a waste of energy. And the body rebalances itself as far as hormone levels go and inflammatory processes. And this is just a normal repair cycle that the body takes advantage of. It's not putting energy out digesting food, then it uses that energy to repair itself, to rebalance its immune system, hormones, etc. Well, and that's just hardwired into us. That's what happens when we're in the fasting state. Well, for 8 years, I was on the staff of True North Health Center in Santa Rosa, California, and we would use therapeutic fasting to take advantage of these remarkable responses the body has to drinking water for a number of days. Blood pressures come down, diabetes gets easier to manage, inflammation cools off, sore joints get better. It's a remarkable state. So there's now a whole discipline of therapeutic water fasting, and we take advantage of these responses in the body. Now, that said, it's a stress on the body, and if you're going to be doing, if you're basically healthy and not on medications, anybody can do a 3, 4, 5 day water fast at home. The body you'll do fine. But if it's longer than that, if you are trying to exert a medical effect, lower high blood pressure, cool off inflamed joints, settle autoimmune disease down, then you ought to be in a place where there's medical supervision. At True North, this was we did professional water fast supervision. We drew blood on these people, checked their kidney function, checked their liver function, and if everything was okay and they weren't on medications that we couldn't stop at least, we had them start on a water-only fast. So sometimes we use vegetable broth as well. And we watch them like a hawk. We check them twice a day. The intern knocks on the door in the clinic. How are you doing? Any nausea, any headache, getting lightheaded? We watch these folks like a hawk. And if they start getting nauseated or lightheaded, we stop the fast. So this is not something to do in a cavalier manner. It needs to be done professionally. If you're doing it more than a 4 or 5 day fast, you should be supervised. And with that caveat, as I mentioned, it can be a very effective therapy to get improvements in these medical conditions. But as I tell the patients and the young interns who would rotate through there, the fast is wonderful, very powerful, etc. But what really matters is what you eat after the fast. Because if they do this wonderful fast, lower their blood pressure and their joints are cooled off, if they go out then and eat their cheeseburgers and pizzas and buffalo wings, boy, within 48 hours, everything comes back. The blood pressure goes back up, the joints get inflamed, the skin erupts. The water-only fast needs to be a jumping-off platform to get into a whole food plant-based diet. Okay, and while they're fasting, we give them cooking classes and food demonstrations and videos. We want them so when they leave, when they walk into their kitchen at home, they know they're going to be eating soups and salads and veggies and a whole food plant-based diet. And by the way, it's not cruel and unusual punishment to go to a cooking class while you're doing a water fast.
I was thinking that exact thing.
Because by day 3, hunger is gone. The ketones suppress hunger. It's God's gift to fasters. You don't spend 21 days hungry. By day 3, not only are most of these folks not hungry, but all the energy that would normally be used to digest their food is freed up because they're not digesting food, and they feel it in their bodies. Patients would stop me in the courtyard at the clinic. Doc, I feel great. I haven't felt this good in 30 years. I haven't eaten in 3 weeks, but I feel wonderful. It's counterintuitive. You think they're all going to be weak and tired and cold and whimpering on the bed. And the truth is they're not hungry. They feel balanced and good. It's a remarkable state. Some of them go through a detox. They go through a few days of nausea and muscle aches. Some of them, not many, but some will go through a detox. But once they go through that, they wind up in this lovely state. Some of them say, Doc, I don't want to start eating again. I feel so good. But if we get them to refeed on boiled zucchini chunks and vegetable soups and very light reintroduction into the world of eating. And with most of them, we're able to maintain the wonderful changes that they experience in a water fast. So therapeutic water fasting is a real thing, and it needs to be done right by people who know what they're doing. But it's not flaky quack therapies. Can people do a water fast at home? Yes. We spend all day, we eat all the time. We do not tolerate hunger. If you're at all hungry, you hit the fridge or you hit the restaurant. We don't tolerate hunger. But 1 day on water, 2 days on water, it often leaves you lighter and cleaner. Yeah, those are the toughest days there. As I mentioned, by day 3 or 4, the hunger's gone. So we have folks, if you're really into it, once a month, do a weekend on water only, or vegetable broth, which you can make or buy at the store. And then in a month or two, make it 3 days. And then after a month or two, 4 days, and just slowly build up 5 days as far as you want to go. But you can learn how to do water fasting safely at home. And there are articles and books on how to do that. And it would probably benefit us all. If all of us did 3-4 days on water once a month, I think we'd all be healthier for it. But again, it's the food in between the fast that really matters.
So we know that there's benefit to fasting. But what about LDL, cholesterol, and saturated fat? Some people think it's bad, other people think it's fine. But what does naturopathic doctor, Dr. Matthew Nagra, think?
Yeah, so there's two things. Let's touch LDL first. So LDL cholesterol, it causes heart disease, causes atherosclerosis. We know that. We have data from genetic studies, from cohort studies, from randomized controlled trials. We know that that's the case. So this idea that low cholesterol or low LDL is actually bad for you and that you want to have it higher actually comes from data on elderly populations. So when we look at older populations and we look at their LDL levels, there's a lot of times where actually lower LDL levels will signify worse health and they'll actually have higher mortality rates. The reason that is because as you get sick, if you end up with cancer or other diseases, your LDL can actually drop. So they're sick, causing their LDL to drop. And then obviously the low LDL is going to be associated with poorer health outcomes. But it's not the low LDL causing the health issue. And that's where they mess up. Now we have multiple Mendelian randomization experiments. This is looking at genetically determined LDL levels. And we find that actually lower LDL is associated with greater longevity, higher LDL, earlier death. And so that should really be the final nail in the coffin, because that's lifelong. That's not considering that, later in life you get sick, your LDL drops. We're like, no, lifelong from birth till death, your LDLs are lower and you tend to do better. So that kind of gets rid of that issue. The saturated fat one, I mean, there's a few angles that people take with this. There are some studies that do something called an over adjustment. So if you look at saturated fat consumption and heart disease risk, for example, we know that saturated fat raises your LDL cholesterol, and then higher LDL, like I just said, causes heart disease. Well, they'll do this adjustment for LDL. So they'll actually match people up essentially based on their LDL levels. So they'll look at people eating more or less saturated fat with the same LDL. And now everyone's going to have genetic differences. So that kind of eliminates the impact of saturated fat on your LDL, right? If A leads to B and B leads to C, but you just remove B as a variable altogether, you're never going to find that connection between A and C. And so that's a big issue that comes up in a lot of the research actually that's commonly cited there. And then the last one, there's a couple trials done on saturated fats versus like polyunsaturated fats, normally found in either vegetable oils, nuts, seeds, and those sorts of things, where they actually found possibly worse outcomes for the polyunsaturated fats. However, these were a couple trials done in like the 60s and 70s where they were using margarines that were full of trans fats. And that was before we knew a ton about trans fats. And so if you're replacing saturated fat with polyunsaturated fats, but these polyunsaturated fats just happen to come packaged with all this trans fat, that's obviously going to lead to worse outcomes, because trans fats are even worse than saturated fats. So that's really where all of that, or almost all of that confusion comes from, is from those few issues.
And then we've got the monster topic of weight loss. I want to point to my interview with Jenny Cameron and Dr. Malcolm Mackay for this beast of a topic. Why is it that people lose weight when they start adopting a plant-based diet?
It's a multiphasic thing. Right at the very beginning, they're unloading a lot of salt. It's the salt in your body that hangs onto the fluid. It's how your body regulates its sort of volume of fluid. And so if you've come from a standard Australian diet or a vegan diet with lots of processed food, every day you're piling in the salt, and you could easily be carrying around an extra litre of fluid. If you're a large person, you might even be carrying around 2 or 3 litres. And so during the first few days, you'll unload that salt and the fluid, and of course you'll lose a kilo per litre of fluid that you unload. I think I guess the next stage of weight loss is it's often fairly rapid in the first few weeks.
Yeah.
And that could be partly because the person, it could be unintended and even undesirable for some people, and it's because they haven't quite adjusted or adapted to the larger volume of food.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had people come to the immersion and serve a little bit of food, sort of like buffet style, serve a little bit of food onto their plate. And then they go back and then they look over at Jenny's plate. They look at my plate and just think, yeah, he's a weirdo and he went running this morning. And then they look at Jenny's plate, but then they look at like Jenny's 85-year-old mother often comes along, and they might look at her plate, which is also piled high, and may go back to the buffet and put more food on it. So the weight loss will tend to continue. However, There are some traps in that. When I see people who are stuck with a weight loss, it may be because they're eating out just a little bit, like maybe 2 or 3 lunches and a couple of dinners. Like sometimes people, most of their meals can look pretty good and fairly low sort of calorie density. But just those few items of rich food can add a huge amount of calories in each hit. And that can sometimes be, if I see people who have been doing whole foods plant-based, for at least many months, and their weight's a bit stuck, and you look through their food diary, often you do find that there's an excess of nuts and seeds. And of course, it goes without saying that, if there's a little bit of oil here and there, then there's an awful lot of calories of oil.
Now on to the next topic, veganism. You've noticed a lot of people in conversations, they say they eat a plant-based diet. Some say vegan diet, but there is a clear and distinct line between being vegan and being plant-based. While I personally say I eat a plant-based diet, and most generally speaking, I eat a whole foods plant-based diet, I'm first and foremost a vegan and animal rights and climate activist. And this is how I started in the space, and I'm proud of that. So while I say plant-based, I'm not ashamed or afraid of the word vegan. And when I hear a vegan diet, that generally means it's all-encompassing. You just exclude animal products and animal byproducts. You don't wear things like leather, suede, wool, things like this. And you don't support zoos and other establishments that don't treat animals with a fair approach. And I would consider someone with a plant-based diet more inclined to be plant-based due to the health reasons or the health benefits of a plant-based diet. This is someone who might still wear leather or cashmere or wool, but will not consume any animal products. I don't talk about being vegan quite a lot on the show, but I do think it is a great philosophy to hold. And of all the people I've interviewed, from memory, I believe there's only 2 people that I have that weren't fully vegan, but talked about different options to include plants and health into their lifestyle, which I think was beneficial for everyone to hear. Now, one question that I hear come up in Facebook groups a lot is, should vegans eat at non-vegan places? And who better to ask than climate activists and the girl who brought vegan food to Dunkin' Donuts, Lana Wiedgenen.
I think it's personal preference if someone is going to feel that way, right? If they if they don't feel comfortable eating somewhere where there's non-vegan options also being prepared, I think if someone wants to do that, I'm not going to push them. If that is like ethically, morally what they feel comfortable with. I don't think that they should go on Facebook groups and yell at other people or complain about this issue or complain about like non-vegan places offering vegan options, because I think that is great and that's where we're going to have the most progress for environmental issues for animals. Whatever the cause really is, this is the best thing for the cause that is becoming mainstream, that is being offered to places where non-vegans will walk in and they'll see that huge advertisement for a plant-based breakfast sandwich, and they'll be like, oh, this is interesting, it's made from plants, and like all this kind of marketing and all this new like recognition. And I think that's a great entryway for people who, starting with things that they're familiar with, especially with a lot of, some vegans don't really support Beyond and Impossible, and I agree that they're not completely perfect, but I think they're a great option to have, especially for people who aren't vegan yet, to know that they can eat something that's so similar to taste and texture that they're used to. I think it's a great way that you can show them, hey, you can eat exactly what you currently eat, and it's made from plants. It's healthier, it's more environmentally friendly. It's not perfect yet, right? It's not a whole foods diet, which is much better for you, but it is a great thing to have, and it's so much better for the cause. So I don't think that these people should be going on Facebook groups and complaining about the progress this is causing, or complaining about, it shouldn't be about perfection, honestly. Ultimately, there's always going to be something animal sourced, whether it's in your medication, whether it's in some other small element in society, right? We don't live in a vegan world. We don't live in a plant-based world. And I don't think that's the point. I don't think the point is to be 100% rather than 99.8% plant based. But I think that also I'm not going to pressure anyone in terms of their ethics and morals. Just if you are thinking of the cause, if you're thinking about what's most effective, what can really help, and if you really care about climate change and environment and the animals, this is something you should be celebrating.
This next video, I didn't know which category to slide it in, but I think it is very important, and it's something I only learned recently, and my mind has really shifted to talking about this this topic in a particular way since my conversation with the co-founder of Agriculture Fairness Alliance, Laura Reese, and that is, being vegan doesn't mean you support farmers. People have this idea, and I did for a lot of years, that cattle and meat products come from this small business, this small farmer who has a few cows on their big field roaming. It's like the whole concept of a smiling cow, because that's a story that's sold to us for many years, and it's something that we don't question enough. But what Laura said in this interview really shocked me.
I think you want to stop thinking about them as farmers and thinking of them more as agribusinesses. Those are the ones who benefit from these laws. So you look at like beef packing, and four huge or meat packing, four huge agribusinesses control 80% of the meat packing market in the US. So it's heavily monopolized. So these guys aren't like small American farmer. These are huge corporations that have cornered the market. They're getting a lot of the benefits. When you look at the small and medium farmer, the interesting thing is actually the USDA, it's a public agency, a public institution. And the volunteers at AFA sometimes we will call up FSA or NRCS agents and ask a question to find out like what's the advice they're giving to farmers. And they're actually really well funded, and they're unionized, and they give advice and they bend over backwards to help the small farmers. And if you look at a lot of the legislation that's in the Farm Bill, it's for beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers, small farmers, mid-sized farmers. The problem is that a lot of farmers, they don't know these programs exist. So you see these bills being added to the Farm Bill, like how to outreach to these smaller farmers. And it seems to me like a lot of the big money programs just don't get to the small farmers, even though the agency kind of, you can tell they want to. But the groups who know how to eke out every last penny from these programs are the big agribusinesses and the big farmer groups who hire people who just like go through the policy and they apply for every possible grant that they can possibly win, and they win them. Whereas the smaller farmers, I mean, I don't know about you, but me, I hate paperwork. I mean, even if I know there's money I'm going to be retrieving, filing some paperwork, I drag my feet like a toddler before I finally open up the web page and fill out all the forms and print it out and sign my name and put it in an envelope and put it in the mailbox or whatever needs to be done. So it's a matter of if it's not almost like automatic payments going to farmers to help them out, you're just going to see the big guys taking the money and the smaller guys. You're going to have some who go in and get the money they want. You see grants all the time when you look through like the SIG grants or the AFRI grants. You see some grants going to like smaller projects at universities. But on the whole, it's the well-organized moneyed interests who know how to do the footwork to collect the money.
I wanted the last category to be about the future. The what now? Cellular agriculture, young people, conversations we are yet to have. I'll kick this category off with Joshua Ampenson, the founder of Green Africa Youth Organization, and his thoughts on the role of young people today.
A lot of young people do not really understand what adaptation is. So there's a knowledge capacity which is limited. and rather it's easier to advocate on what is mainstream. And when I say mainstream, it's mostly what you will hear being written about, talking sort of mainstream media, what is being talked about in your typical news articles. And you will agree with me that there's been a lot of conversations around all the mitigation measures. I mean, tree planting is so standard, everybody knows about this as a solution, right? Eating less meat is very, very standard. Almost a lot of people know that this is a solution, even if they don't practice it. They know. We know that. I mean, flying less is certainly something we have to do. Cutting your carbon footprint. We know these measures are very important, but not enough communication is done about those who are seeing the impact today and things we can do today to support them. So this was the challenge that we saw, that hence a lot of young people then talk about what is more mainstream, and hence we need to sort of work with institutions to produce knowledge content to complement the existing knowledge that young people have, particularly on youth, that they are able to understand that, okay, we need these carbon emission reduction strategies, but we also need to support communities today. But a second part of that was also realizing that there are huge institutional barriers and lack of credibility for young people. And of course, this is very context specific, but in some contexts, it's also very global, that young people have been long regarded as the vulnerable group, the people who need to help. They will live in the future. They are the future leaders. We need to help them. And so that comes from a place of weakness rather than a place of strength, right? And hence how institutions engage with young people with this mindset of we need to help them, we need to offer them, we need to give them. That changes the narrative than when we want them to think of we need to bring them on board. Not like they have to come to us to help us, but they have to bring us on board to help them. And that is a completely different narrative, that, oh, they are more faster in the way they think, they are more adaptive in the way they do things, they are adapting to new forms of lifestyle and livelihood that is better for the future. They are more technologically advanced than we are. So let's bring them on board and see how they can help us fix this problem. So these were very two different narratives. And part of the paper was also discovering that, yeah, institutions clearly see young people as the target group, beneficiaries of their actions, rather than seeing them as more implementers or stakeholders who will help them achieve their target of sort of providing a safe space and a healthy planet for everyone. And of course, the lack of credibility of young people, what ties to the education part of saying that they don't know the details, they don't understand the full picture. They are not, they don't understand the whole thing. Wait till you get to parliament, you see how difficult this is. I mean, you're not in that room, so you won't understand. And these are the common excuses we get from decision makers, right? Like, oh, wait till you are there, you understand how it looks like. Wait till you don't understand the full picture yet. And I think these things are, of course, we don't understand the full picture, true. But if you want us to understand the full picture, then let us understand the full picture. Create a system that allows that. And that is to say that we need an institutional framework that really builds the capacity of young people to see the broader picture of this climate crisis debate and see how they can support on that. But if you keep us out of the politics and you put us on the edge of advocacy alone, on the edge of being beneficiaries of your framework and your policies, then of course we don't understand the full picture, then we can't help you. And then we will keep complaining.
And now we've all heard about cellular agriculture, and it's something that is quite divisive for a lot of people. And if you support a whole foods plant-based diet, it's probably not something for you. However, if you follow a vegan diet, it might be something you're interested in. And it's mainly targeted for people who eat the animal products and don't want to give up. That is where the concept of cellular agriculture stands. That is what they want people to do. It's not for the vegans. It's for people who currently consume meat, are not willing to give it up, so they're making a product with a lesser eco impact without harming the animals, not using as much water, land, and it's not as intensive for anyone. And it's scalable to almost an infinite level. This potential gold mine can really save us from climate change. And so I thought I should definitely include an explanation of what it is from Dr. Jadira Saldana.
Well, basically what we need for starting this process are, in general, they are stem cells. There are different types of stem cells, but those are the ones that are normally used for starting the production of cultured meat.
And so walk me through this process. You go to an animal and you withdraw some blood, however you do that, with a syringe or whatever that may be. And then what do you do with that?
Yeah, so basically, normally you obtain the cells, let's say, there's different processes. So one is by obtaining a tiny sample from the animal, which is called a biopsy, and that's something that is normally done also in humans as well when they need to look for certain diseases. For example, they take samples of tissue, and they are really, really small samples. So in theory, the animal it's not harmed at all during this process. The interesting part as well is that depending on the company or the researcher, samples can also be withdrawn from, for example, an egg, or there are some researchers that have been using even a feather to withdraw the initial samples. So that's just to give an idea of how harmless the process is. And once you have that sample, what you do is you isolate some cells, and those are the stem cells. Now, there are different types of stem cells, and all of them have advantages and disadvantages based on, it's really depending on the process that scientists are following. But let's say that one type of stem cells are called myosatellites. And those are stem cells that are found within the muscle tissue. And one of their main characteristics is that these cells allow us to, they can multiply and produce more more muscle cells. So these myosatellite cells are already muscle cells that can divide into more muscle cells, and that will help us produce more tissue at the end. Now, one of the advantages of using myosatellites during the process is that they are already differentiated. But one of the disadvantages is that they have just a certain amount of dividing processes that they can achieve. So at some point, these cells, let's say they age and they can't multiply anymore. So that's a disadvantage, because what we want is huge quantities of cells to produce massive amounts of meat. So scientists are also looking at other type of stem cells, which are, let's call neutral cells. I call them neutral cells because they can differentiate in any type of cell that we want. They can differentiate into skin, into muscle, into fat. So those are great because then we can they can multiply several times, way more than myosatellite cells. But the problem is that because they can be differentiated in so many different types of tissues, it's hard to control them, and like they are not so stable. So that's one of the challenges of using those kind of cells. So right now, scientists are actually trying to figure out what's the best way to go, which type of cells are the best in terms of allowing us to produce massive amounts. And that's actually part of the research that is going through to figuring out how to produce stable cell lines that will allow us to produce huge quantities of cells at the end.
Okay, I think that's the last one I'll insert. This episode has become long enough, I think. It's been crazy to look back along the line of all the amazing conversations that we've had together, you and I. Interviewed so many amazing people, and what I'm really excited about is all the people yet to come. The amazing people like Mike the Vegan, Dr. Andrew Little, Tony Okamoto from plantbasedonabudget.com. I've got vegan chef Josie Clemens, and so many more already to come. As always, I've put in the show notes all the ways you can get in contact with us. And if you've listened to a fair few of my episodes and you want to support the show, There's a few ways you can do so. The first is just by following us along. So whether on YouTube, that means clicking subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Castbox, whatever it is, just hitting that follow button or subscribe button helps us out a lot. For people listening on Apple or iTunes, leaving a review is actually really, really meaningful. And it's something that I'm going to have to start reading out on the show because there are a few amazing reviews in there that I want to highlight really to you guys. And another way you can support the show is by sharing this episode and other episodes that you find valuable to your friends and family. It's an easy way for us to grow. It's also an easy way to educate the world. If you have an amazing resource that you like, share it around. If you've listened to our episode with Jenny Cabron and Dr. Malcolm Mackay and you think that guide to having a whole food plant-based diet is useful, save it and share it. And last but not least, if you want to support the show with a monetary way, I've set up a buymeacoffee.com link. So you can go buymeacoffee.com/plantparadigm. I'll also leave that linked in the show notes. So that is a way that you can buy us an oat latte or soy latte, whatever you'd like, in whatever amount you'd like as well. It does accept old card payments. This is definitely a service we do out of love. Obviously, there is no episode that you have listened to that has started with a sponsor. There's no money or kickbacks we get from this giveaway with these products. And there's no money that we make on Instagram either. It is purely a platform and thing we do for love. And because we're passionate about the planet, we're passionate about solving climate change and making sure people can be the healthiest versions of themselves. So if you have a spare $3, $5, $10 to help us out, fund, what that'll do is really, there's a cost involved with putting podcasts up. There's a cost involved with a lot of things, and that really helps that out. But other than that, stay tuned for next week's episode. Stay happy, eat plants, peace.